It is Thursday, January 22nd, 2026. And if you have been doom scrolling, and let's be honest, who hasn't this week, you've seen the map of the world looking, well, a little shaky.
Shaky is a very polite way of putting it. I mean, we are watching a geopolitical pressure cooker in the Arctic that makes the Cold War look almost quaint.
We are, of course, talking about Greenland. And specifically, the fact that United States President Donald Trump has essentially declared the U.S. is going to do something about the island. And the phrasing there, it really matters, doesn't it?
It's a fundamental shift. A few years ago, the whole conversation was about buying Greenland. And people laughed. You know, it was a meme.
It was a late-night joke.
Exactly. But now, the rhetoric is about annexation. The phrase isn't purchase, it's take.
Which is, I mean, it's terrifying if you actually live there. So here's our mission for this deep dive. We're going to try to look past the shouting match between Washington and Copenhagen. We're going to look at the people on the ground. We've been through reports from ICT. That's a fantastic Indigenous news source, plus Canadian Geographic, the Canadian Press, and we've even been digging through the Greenland subreddit.
And what's emerging is, well, it's pretty surprising. While the superpowers are arguing over minerals and bases, the Inuit populations in Greenland and Canada are mobilizing. They're calling it one voice.
Okay, so let's start with the immediate crisis. How did we get from, memes about buying an island to a genuine annexation threat in January 2026? What was the trigger?
The catalyst was a statement President Trump made on January 9th. He said he's done with the idea of paying off Greenlanders. He explicitly said, we're going to do something on Greenland, whether they like it or not.
Whether they like it or not. Wow.
And his rationale is all about defense. He's claiming that if the U.S. doesn't control it, China or Russia will.
But is this just bluster? I mean, is there a real reason to believe this is more than just talk?
Well, you have to look at the context. Canadian Geographic highlighted something really important. A reaction from Nivi Rosing. She's the youngest member of parliament in Greenland.
And what did she say?
She pointed directly to the recent U.S. actions in Venezuela.
You mean the incident with the president there?
The kidnapping of the president and his wife, yes. Rosing's argument is just chillingly logical. She's saying if a superpower is willing to physically remove a head of state in the Western Hemisphere, then annexation is no longer a theory.
It's a playbook. It's something they've shown they can do.
Exactly. And then you have Stephen Miller, a top aide, going on CNN.
I saw a clip of that. He basically said the quiet part out loud.
He really did. He confirmed the White House view. Greenland should be American. But the key part, the part that really matters, is his assessment of the defense. He said if the U.S. moved to take it, no one would mount a military defense.
He's betting that Denmark won't fight and Greenland can't.
That's the bet.
Okay, so let's play devil's advocate for a second. Why Greenland? I get that it's huge and strategic, but is it worth blowing up NATO over? Alienating all of Europe?
It really comes down to two factors. What I'd call the gatekeeper effect and the periodic table.
The periodic table, you mean mining?
Critical minerals, yeah. Greenland is sitting on these massive deposits of rare earth elements, neodymium, dysprosium, things you probably never heard of but are absolutely non-negotiable for, EV batteries, fighter jets, missile guidance.
And China controls most of that supply chain now.
They dominate it. So from a U.S. perspective, securing Greenland's deposits is an existential national security issue. You control the minerals, you control the future of tech.
And the gatekeeper part.
That's the location. If you control Greenland, you control access to the Arctic and the North Atlantic. The U.S. already has the Pitofuk Space Base there. It used to be called Thule Air Base.
Since the 50s, right?
Yeah, since 1951. Critical for missile warning. But leasing a base is one thing. Owning the entire landmass, that's a whole different level of power. You own it, you can shut the gate on anyone you want.
So the U.S. sees a fortress, but the people living there see their home. What's the reaction been like?
Internationally, it's a firestorm. All the Nordic foreign ministers, Norway, Sweden, Finland, Iceland, Denmark, put out a joint statement supporting Greenland sovereignty. But the local reaction is much more visceral.
We're seeing protests.
Big ones for the population size. In Nuuk, the capital, and then right across the water in Iqaluit in northern Canada. And the slogan everywhere is, Greenland belongs to Inuit.
And this is where that one voice concept comes in. Break that down for us, because it sounds like more than just a chant.
It is. It's a whole political philosophy. We have to talk about Aju Peter. She's an activist, a lawyer, born in Greenland, but lives in Nunavut, Canada.
Okay.
In the middle of all this panic and fear, her stance is just remarkably composed.
Imposed how? I think I'd be freaking out.
She's calling for strategic calm. Her thinking is that Trump wants fear. He wants division. If the Inuit panic, it just plays into his narrative. So instead, she's pushing for the traditional Inuit way of building consensus. She actually said, we should all speak and support each other with one voice.
It's almost like she's saying, we've survived ice ages and colonization. We can survive this.
That is absolutely the subtext, but she's not naive about it. She knows that if international law, if things like NATO and the UN collapse, the Inuit need to be ready to form their own agreements. It's sovereignty based on peoplehood, not statehood.
But not everyone is being so calm. We found some pretty sharp words from other leaders like Manitouk Thompson.
Ah, the Stone Age comment.
Yes. She said buying countries is Stone Age mentality. She framed it as a human rights issue, that Inuit are not property to be bought and sold. It just cuts right through the noise.
It does. It creates this stark contrast. On one side, you have this 21st century indigenous rights discourse. And on the other, you have what feels like 19th century imperial expansion. They're speaking two completely different languages.
It really highlights something I hadn't appreciated. This isn't just a Greenland problem, it's a pan-Inuit problem.
That is the key insight. You have leaders like Kathy Kautongi saying these family lines existed for thousands of years before someone drew a line on a map. For them, the border is imaginary, the family is real.
But there's a very real practical fear there, too. I saw comments from Tupernak Kopek, who was born in Greenland but lives in Alberta.
Right. She pointed out the elephant in the room.
We don't have a military.
Exactly. Greenland is self-governing, but it's part of the Kingdom of Denmark. Defense has always been Copenhagen's job. But now the threat is coming from a NATO ally.
It's a total betrayal. If your protector's best friend decides to rob your house, who do you even call?
The police are already in the getaway car. It creates this profound sense of vulnerability.
It does. But this brings us to the part of the research that just blew me away. We talk about Canadian and Greenlandic Inuit as cousins, but I had no idea how literal that was.
Oh, it's not a metaphor at all. The cultural highway across Baffin Bay is very, very real.
This was my favorite find from the documentary Vanishing Point. We're going back to the 1860s.
Right. The U.S. Civil War is happening.
And up in the Arctic, a shaman named Quidlar Suok has a vision. He gathers a group of Inuit from Baffin Island in Canada and leads a migration across the sea ice
to northwestern Greenland. It's an incredible story, and this is an ancient history. This was 160 years ago. That migration reconnected communities that had been separated for centuries. They shared technology stories, they intermarried.
And they interview an elder in the film, Navarana Sorensen,
who is a direct descendant of that shaman.
So when you see a Canadian Inuk protesting for Greenland today, they might literally be fighting for their great-aunt's home.
Precisely. The bloodlines are fresh. And you see this reflected in the language. We were looking at a discussion on the Greenland subreddit. There was a goldmine for this.
Well, first I learned the basic difference between Inuit and Inuk. I should have known that.
It's simple. Inuk is one person. Inuit is the people, plural. But the really fascinating part is the writing system. In Canada, in Nunavut, you see those geometric shapes on signs. That's syllabics.
Which missionaries introduced.
Correct.
Right.
But in Greenland, because of the Danish influence, they use the Latin alphabet. So you have a people who can understand each other when they speak, but they might not be able to read each other's writing. It's a barrier created entirely by colonization.
That's a huge hurdle to having one voice.
It is, though technology is helping. But here's a detail that ties it all back. The region in Greenland where that shaman settled, an area called Kanak, they speak a dialect called Inuktitut.
Okay.
Linguistically, it's actually closer to Canadian Inuktitut than it is to the standard Greenlandic you hear in the capital. The history of that migration is literally encoded in their accent.
That's amazing. But Greenland itself isn't a monolith, is it? We were reading about the difference between the East and West coasts.
No, it's not. This is crucial. East Greenland, or Tunu, is incredibly isolated. They had no contact with Europeans until 1884.
1884, that's yesterday historically.
It really is. By then, the West Coast had been trading with Europe for a century, so the East Coast culture is very distinct. This is where the tupilak comes from.
Ah, I've seen those. This little scary carving.
Made of bone or antler.
Yeah.
Today they're art, but originally they were spiritual weapons you'd create to curse an enemy. It's a reminder of this deep, complex society.
They also have a way of settling disputes that I think we could use at the UN.
The drum dance.
Yeah. Instead of a fight, it's basically a rap battle.
Essentially. You'd sing satirical songs mocking your opponent, and the audience decided the winner based on who was wittier.
Can you imagine that solving this crisis?
I think the Greenlandic side might win on wit alone.
I would watch that. But since we are stuck with regular geopolitics, we have to talk about Canada's role. It seems like they're pivoting, and hard.
They are. We have a different administration now with Prime Minister Mark Carney, and he's taking a much more muscular approach to Arctic sovereignty.
The elbows up movement. I've seen the T-shirts.
Right, and diplomatically, Canada is opening a standalone consulate in Nuuk next month. That's a major signal. It says, we see you as a distinct partner. It's a diplomatic tripwire for the U.S.
But there's a fun fact here that actually has huge legal weight now. The Whiskey War.
The most polite conflict in human history.
For decades, Canada and Denmark argued over this tiny rock, Hans Island, by leaving each other bottles of Canadian whiskey or Danish schnapps.
It was a running joke, but the resolution 2022 is what matters. They split the island down the middle.
So Canada and Greenland now share an actual land border.
They do. It's only 1.3 kilometers long, but it exists. And the treaty allows freedom of movement for Inuit right across it.
So when the U.S. threatens to take Greenland, they're not just threatening some island. They're threatening a neighbor Canada shares a physical fence with.
Exactly. It completely reframes the issue from being about overseas aid to being about border defense.
So let's zoom out to the big picture. What does this all mean for the world? You mentioned spheres of influence earlier. That sounds like something out of a history book.
It is, and its return is alarming. This analysis comes from Robert Hubert at the University of Calgary. He argues this is a regression to 19th century geopolitics. The idea that a great power has the right to dominate its own neighborhood.
The Monroe Doctrine.
On steroids. The argument is that the U.S. controls the Western Hemisphere, period. It doesn't matter what Europe thinks, and it doesn't matter what the locals think.
And if you're Canada, you are right in the middle of the Western Hemisphere.
That's the terrifying implication.
Yeah.
Hubert's point is, if the U.S. is willing to rupture NATO to grab resources in Greenland, what stops them from applying that same logic to the Canadian Arctic? If national security is the only justification you need, then no one is safe.
So the One Voice movement isn't just about protecting Greenland, it's about protecting sovereignty itself.
It is the ultimate assertion of self-determination. The Inuit argument is so simple and powerful. Greenland isn't Denmark's to sell. It never was. And it's certainly not America's to buy. It belongs to the people who live there.
It reframes the whole thing. It's not a real estate deal. It's a human rights crisis.
It is. And it's a test of the entire international order.
So to recap this deep dive, we have a superpower looking north for minerals and dominance. We have an indigenous population finding one voice across colonial borders, using culture and history as their shield. And we have Canada realizing its neighbor's house fire is about to burn down its own fence.
It's a story of resilience. You have these massive powers treating the Arctic like a chessboard. But the pieces on the board are people, and they are refusing to be played.
I think that's the key takeaway. The map is not the territory.
And that's the thought I want to leave everyone with. As you watch this unfold, consider this. What does sovereignty actually mean in 2026? Is it defined by lines on a map drawn by powers centuries ago? Or is it defined by the people who have lived on that land for thousands of years?
The U.S. might be able to buy the map. I'm not so sure they can ever conquer the territory.
I don't think they can. The land remembers.
That is a lot to think about. Keep your eyes on the north. Thanks for listening to this deep dive. We'll see you next time.